everyone. Today I have with me best-selling author Sheila Kohler. Sheila has written many, many books, but I think this book, Once We Were Sisters, is her first nonfiction book. Am I right, Sheila?
Yes, you're absolutely right.
I looked through it today just to make sure before I said that, but I was like, if there's one out there that I haven't been able to find, But I have to tell you, I love this book so much. I read through it twice. I loved it so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
And I know everybody is saying this to you, but I don't have a sister. And so that's what kind of made it interesting for me is that the book is about your sister, and I thought maybe I wouldn't be able to connect, but I have daughters. And so I kept picturing, and my daughters are 4 years apart, but I kept picturing them, and they're in their 20s now. My one daughter's 25 and the other one's 21. And I just, it was, I just kept crying because I was like, oh, I hope they feel this way. Like it would be my joy as a mom to give birth to sisters that, have this kind of a connection. And I know they talk every day, and I know you have daughters too. So, do you think that way too? Like when you watch them?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. It's so precious to me that they have one another. That's so important, I think, because you feel they'll have one another all their lives. Your parents you are going to lose at some point, but sisters are there for you. In the best of cases, they're there for you all your life.
Yes, and I have 6 children. So I was relating to Maxine in this book, but my daughters are in the middle. So I have 2 boys, 2 girls, 2 boys. And I remember when I was pregnant with my second daughter, I didn't really, I never really cared about the boy-girl thing so much, but I remember thinking, oh, it would be so cool to give her a sister because I didn't have one. So when I found out she was a girl, I was so happy that they would have each other. And now that they're all growing up, I have to say, like, not that the boys aren't close, but I watch their relationship be so much deeper than my boys' relationships with each other.
That's interesting.
So
I never had a brother, so I can't compare. But certainly, I think that bond between 2 girls is very close. Yeah.
Yes, and I didn't really think about it until reading your book, and I was really kind of analyzing their relationship, and I was really thinking, that it's true. It really is. I do understand where you were coming from because I watch them, and I'm like, that's what they have. Like, that's what, sometimes, like, I'll call them in the morning and, they'll be on the phone with each other. Like, I'll call one, they don't pick up. I call the other, they don't pick up. And then I know they're talking to each other, and I'm like,
I know.
All right.
Yeah, and the lovely thing is that my sister had 5 girls and 1 boy, and those girls, I think, are very close today. And not really having parents, it makes them cling to one another even more, I think, because they are really all that they have. Yes, so certainly a very important bond.
Yes, and my daughters do not have the same father. So that's another interesting twist. Yeah, they don't have my first 3 children were with my first marriage, my second 3 were with my second marriage, and they were the ones in the middle, but it doesn't matter. I know, like, by watching, that was another thing that I was always thinking might matter, but it doesn't matter at all. Like, it doesn't even matter to them, They don't, it doesn't, and I'm so happy about that, I'm really happy about it because they only have each other. But anyway, you have lived, like, your life has been incredible. And I was thinking, like, compared to my life, I've always lived in the United States. I have traveled around a little bit. I've never been to Europe. I've never been, I've been to Canada. So I was kind of like living through you as you were like going to all these awesome places. And I'm like envisioning like, what must that have been like to just travel the world at, like you're supposed to say, meet me here. And you'd be like, okay. And you get on a plane and you just go.
Well, I think though that, each one of us thinks that our life is ordinary. And I never really realized that my life was so, what people would call exotic. You don't realize that because it's your life, and that's all you know. So I just thought that was, the norm until I started to write and people said, oh, that's so, different. So I think each life really is unique in that we all probably do have a story to tell if we would tell it, which is hard to do, of course.
Yes, and I have to say, I consider this book a memoir because it's not written, I look at biographies or autobiographies and it's kind of like this happened, then this happened, then this happened. But this is so much more interesting the way you wrote it as a memoir to your sister.
Thank you.
It's not, the stories are so much richer because they're so like as they're coming up, I feel like as you're writing them, they're just coming up out of you, like you're just sitting down and coming up and I
yes, well, I'm glad that you had that impression. Of course, as a writer, it's not that easy, actually. I'm glad it appears to be that way, but it's very structured, actually. If you look at it carefully, there's sort of a forward movement and then a backward movement, to the flashbacks and that, to give that appearance of one thing triggering another. But actually, in the writing, it was quite difficult, and I had to, rewrite it many times to get that effect, really. But I'm very happy that that's the way you read it. Yes.
Yes. I will be putting the book on my website, but the book itself is so beautiful. I just love the cover and the pictures in it. It helped me so much as the reader to connect to your stories.
Yes.
Yeah,
they are. Yeah, I think they are wonderful, those pictures. I was very lucky that my mother kept them, actually. I had them all in a little box. She kept those photos of us as small children and some of, the house and the garden. And so I was lucky that I had those photos and that also that penguin, my publisher was nice enough to put them in the book because I imagine it must be expensive to publish a book with photographs. Yes.
Well, and the way they publish, like the pages, and people will be able to understand what I'm talking about when they get the book. The flaps on it's all done so perfect. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the pages, the way they're.
It's a lovely book. It's a lovely book, and I'm very grateful. I have a wonderful editor at Penguin who has. Well, this is my 5th book that I've published with them now. Catherine Court, who is just a wonderful person and. A very fine editor, so I was very lucky to be in such good hands.
Yes, and just so on a side note, I did try to get Becoming Jane Eyre, and do you know that I can't get it? Amazon was so backed up on it, it's like a month delay.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Because they're supposed to be republishing it, I think, in conjunction with this new one. Because, the new book has stirred quite a lot of interest. But thank you for telling me, because I will let my editor know it should be available.
Well, we're just so spoiled because when I go on Amazon, I expect to get my books like in 2 days.
Right.
So, when they tell me a month, I'm like, a month? I don't want to wait a month.
Right, right.
And I'm calling Barnes & Noble trying to see if I can get it there, So,
right.
Anyway.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, because I really want to read that book too. Like, after I read this book, I really wanted to read that book. So
good, because there was quite a lot of interest in that book, and in some ways they do overlap because that's also a story of sisters, of course, the Brontes. They were that unusual 3 writers in a family, and I tried to portray that. Was very important to me because of my sister. And really, in all of my books, I have, in one way or another, been writing this story that I finally managed to write as a memoir. But before that, I wrote about it in very different ways and disguised because I couldn't really put it all down at that point on the page. So for many years, I used fiction to write this story in different ways. And certainly the Brontes, the story of the Brontes, was important to me. And the way these 3 sisters had, of course, this wonderful bond, but also a certain amount of antagonism and competition. So that was, when their first books were sent out, Charlotte sent out her first book, which was The Professor. Emily sent Wuthering Heights, and Anne sent Agnes Grey. And the editor who finally took them, Newby, said, well, I'll take two of these books, Wuthering Heights and Agnes Grey, but I don't want The Professor by Charlotte. And of course, Charlotte, the eldest sister. So you can imagine how that must have felt.
Wow.
As a writer. But that galvanized her and made her finish Jane Eyre, which of course then became the big bestseller that it became, and one of our favorite books. Yes.
Yes, and that's why I wanted to get it, because it is one of my favorite books. But and if you could see me, like you are, I saw your picture. You're absolutely beautiful, and I'm only 52, but my hair is like. I hope my hair gets to be what yours is, because it's on its way to white, and I have not colored it. And I was like, I want to tell her how much I love her hair. Like, I can only hope my hair gets that beautiful.
Funny, I actually wrote an essay on why hair is so important, and I started with that, being in a ladies' room, I think at the symphony or something, and a woman coming up to me and saying, what color was your hair? I hope my hair goes white like yours. And I said, well, I don't really remember what color it was at this point.
I know. Same with me. I was blonde, just like you, and my hair started going white very young. Now it's about half white. My blonde is still, it's still there, but it is like half white, and people do ask me the same question, too, because it's in the process of becoming what you already have. So I'm reading this. You are the younger sister, so she's your older sister by 2 years. And I was like, I think that's why it was so heartbreaking for me, because I watch my younger daughter, the way she idolizes my older daughter. And, I used to think when they were younger that it was the other way around. But now as they're getting older, I see, and to have it be so tragic, and to have, what happened to her happen, it was like, how was knowing that, maybe there was something you could have done, or, and she was your big sister, so it's like, it's kind of hard, it's hard to put yourself in that situation, because she's probably protected you most of her life, she was the, the protector,
yes. I followed her around, and did what she did, as younger sisters do. And then, of course, I tried to help her when she would reluctantly tell me about what was going on in her marriage. It's very hard to help people in that situation, I think, generally speaking. And also, we were living very far from one another. But yes, one regrets terribly not having intervened more than one has done. And she was always so reluctant to actually tell me what was happening. She would often tell me things as though they had happened to someone else. So she, in a way, fictionalized, and then she would cry or something, and I would realize this had happened to her. So I would say, this happened to you. And she would say, well, I promised not to tell, and put her hand to her mouth, So it's that silence in these cases of women who are being brutalized or battered in some way by a bully, that they feel that they cannot tell their story. And I feel very strongly about that today. And that's really one of the reasons why I wanted to tell my sister's story, because I know that there is, even today, although this happened a long time ago, more than 35 years ago, and in South Africa, and was in some way a product of that place and time. But these things still happen today, and women still are being killed, and sometimes men. This battering goes on, but it's mostly women. So I feel that it was time for me to speak up and try at least to protect those people who are still suffering in something of a similar situation.
Yes, especially today, because you think, well, that happened back then, but we know that it hasn't changed all that much. maybe, I look at my daughters and I think hopefully, a little bit more because there is more awareness than back then.
Yes.
And,
right.
And
girls do speak up more than they used to.
Yeah.
I do a lot of teaching, and I have girls in my, I teach freshman seminars at Princeton, and I have, girls quite often, obviously, in my classes. And I see today they're the ones often who speak up just as much as the young men, and they're certainly extremely diligent too. I've found that girls really try hard. So I'm delighted when I see that to see how women have made strides. But unfortunately, if you look at the statistics, there are still a lot of women who are killed in this very way after a series of battering. Of course, my sister's death is mysterious, and I cannot say what happened finally. But still, I can say what happened before and what she told me had happened. It just leaves you with the feeling that you should have done more than you had done, that you might have helped in some way. It's very difficult to do. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. It is. And even what you went through with your husband, I related. My first marriage, he had a girlfriend. And I had 3 little children.
Yeah.
And so I so related to what you were going through because when I did tell his family, I got the same reaction that you got, which is, and this was happening in the 80s. Okay, but his parents were doing the exact same, it's okay, this is going to happen, let it go, it'll be fine, we'll take care of him. And when I was reading it, I was like, I can't believe I thought, because when you're reading it, you're like, who would believe that? Who would, and I was like, me, I believe that,
Unfortunately, that's what my mother-in-law would say. She would say, look, it's always up to the woman. In other words, it's your fault that this happened. And now you've got to be patient, close your eyes, pretend that he's got the measles. She would say that, pretend he's got the measles. Don't make him feel guilty. No one wants to feel guilty. And that would be the kind of thing that she would say.
It's crazy. I got the same advice, and I was pregnant. And my ex-mother-in-law would say the same thing. It's better now. Let him do this now. It'll be fine.
He'll get it out of his system. Let him get it out of his system. Admittedly, we were extremely young. My husband and I, my first husband and I, were extremely young. And I can see how it was a time and a place there too. So I'm not saying that he was a bad man or anything of that kind. These things can happen, but one has to defend oneself, and I did not.
Right. Well, I did eventually because as my children were getting a little older, I was thinking that they were going to think this was normal. It became too, that I was like, wait a second, what am I showing them? And then having had a girl then, I was... and then I did eventually
get out of this, of course. But it took many years.
Well, mine took pretty many years too. So you stand up for yourself. But I was looked at when I did stand up for myself. Everybody looked at me like, even my family were like, "Oh, real? You're going to really go out there on your own and be a single mom? Is that what you want?" It's like, no, it's not what I want.
Yes, no. And people tell you, well, it's very hard for a woman, of a certain age. It's much easier for a man, and that kind of thing. Yes, which is discouraging, to say the least.
Yes, and that's why I find this book so empowering, because when I read it, it's like, okay, we did what we made the decisions that we made at that time, but it didn't mean that they were forever decisions, and we did move on, and, we did get past it, and our families got past, our kids got past it, and everything turned out okay at a time.
And in my case, it did enable me to have a writing life, which I'm not sure I would have had if I had stayed in Paris and stayed with my first husband. Because, I came to the States and I went back to school, and I got an MFA, and I really continued with my writing career in a way that I don't think I could have if I had remained in Europe, which is where I was living, beautiful as Paris was. But this coming here has enabled me really to have a career in the writing life, which has been very fulfilling. So my blessed, beloved sister, some good came out of her sadness and sent me to the page, and now to speak with you.
Yes, yes, and
that's well, here. That's our story, and think there's hope out there.
That's right, and that's what I love about your story. Also, when I was reading about you, was that you did go to school later than, after a time that people would have said, well, what are you going to do at that age? Like, you're in your 40s. What are you going? What are you going to do? And you did it. Like, you went and got your degree, and then you did get, now you're a famous but best-selling author. And, I was like, it warmed my heart, because I was like, I want every woman out there to see that when people say it's too late, it's not too late. Nothing is too late. You're still here.
No, never.
It's never too late. And, everybody has a story if that's what they want to do. But, yeah, You're
thank you.
Excellent example.
Thank you so much. Thank you for reading with such sympathy and empathy.
And only the last question I have is about your mom. And because I had a mom. We all have moms, and my mom was only 17 years older than me, so I had a unique situation also.
Wow.
Yeah.
How interesting.
But as I was reading about your mom, even though your mom was older, they had that kind of a tragic essence to them, is what I was getting. It's like
yes, yes, she was both. She was a wonderfully lively young woman, I think, and when I see some photos of her, she was beautiful. She always told us, of course, that she was much more beautiful than we had, but she really was a beautiful young woman. And I think she was lively and interested and loved traveling and that. But it was very hard, I think, for women, white women in South Africa at the time. In a way, they were sort of powerless, because they didn't even have the control that women had anywhere else over at least their own families, their own, because they had all these servants, which sounds wonderful, but it meant that they really served absolutely no purpose whatsoever. They were not able to give back to society in any meaningful way. And they were just there as a sort of decoration. And once they were no longer young and beautiful, they didn't serve much purpose at all. So I think that was hard in a way. It was hard, obviously much harder for the blacks put into that situation. But for the white women who really had no occupation whatsoever and who were just sitting there, they often turned to drink as the only thing that they could basically do. So I think it was a bad situation for everyone, and unfortunately, my mother, I think, succumbed to that temptation. She was taking, drugs and alcohol and whatever she mixed together, and then, of course, she had this great tragedy of losing her daughter, which must be unbearably painful. So I think she had, in some ways, a very privileged but also a hard life, lonely in a way. And I'm so, again, there. I don't know that I could have helped her more, but I remember being in a hotel in Italy and the young doctor coming because she was not well. And he said to me, if you could just take that suitcase with all those pills and throw them away, she'd be fine. But of course, one didn't dare do something like that. She would have probably gone out and bought them all over again anyway.
And she had the means to. Yes,
right.
She had the means to.
She did.
Yeah. And that's what I was thinking, like when, and this is a different country, it's a different world for me, but I was thinking, well, wouldn't the money make it easier to make yourself happy? Like, wouldn't you be able to do, but then not, I guess, like that doesn't really,
Yes, no, it doesn't always, because it enabled her to do nothing. And she was surrounded by these people around her sycophants, who kept telling her she was wonderful and never really confronted her with the reality of the situation. No one ever told me, as a little girl, what was wrong, even as an adolescent. So we didn't understand what was wrong with our mother. And so that was very, I think, confusing for children. Once again, silence and not the truth not being told. So I think children know what's happening on some level, and then if you tell them something that's absolutely not true, they're confused by it. So it was the culture of silence, that time and that place particularly. And I think it's important for children to know, what is going on, what is happening around them. Yeah.
Yes. And my mother did the same thing. I mean, that's why it relates to me. She had the drugs and the alcohol.
Really?
And yes, and she passed away from drugs and alcohol at the age of 63, which was, but she went through the same thing. My dad died young, when we were young, same kind of thing. And I look back at this too, and it's like, I wish I could have taken it away. I couldn't have taken it. There was no way I wouldn't have been able to take anything away from her. But,
no.
It's easier to know that than, to have, because when those memories pop up and you're like, oh, what did I do at that situation? But, that's, it's like she didn't have anything either to occupy her. And even though she didn't have the money, I do think that women during that kind of an age, even though she was a little bit younger than your mom, they didn't know what to do, and she didn't know what to do. She really didn't. She was lost in her own world.
And that women are more fortunate today, and there is more possibility for them to go out and find some kind of meaningful work.
Yes, and that's what I'm so happy that you showed. Like, that is true. It's true. And it is. I'm so happy that I got to talk to you. I'm so happy. Thank you so much for writing this book. It touched my heart.
Thank you
so
much
many
for
ways.
Reading. Thank you so much.
Yes, and I will be putting this up on all my social media that I can, and anything. If you write any, are you working on something else right now?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am actually. Another story, a woman's story. I'm writing actually from the point of view of Sonia, who is the prostitute in Crime and Punishment. I don't know if you remember Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, but there's a young girl, Sonia, who is a prostitute, forced into prostitution by poverty. And really Dostoevsky never gives her a chance to tell her story. She's one of those Victorian perfect women, who is a saint. So I tried to give her a body and an appetite and to allow her to speak up in my pages. So that's my latest work.
And that meant so much to you and your sister too, because you both loved him so much that I'm sure also is really, that's when you said that, I was like, of course.
You are. Yes, we both said we wouldn't marry someone who hadn't read Dostoevsky.
Right. So that's amazing that you can then, I love that about your work. Everything has so much meaning like that, and then you can see your passion through it. It's incredible. So I hope you, if you keep me in touch, we will, I will read the next one and we can chat about it. So
thank you
anyway,
so much.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. And you have a great day, and I hope we'll be talking soon.
You too.